Dajirale, hello, welcome, nice to see you. Today I wanted to talk about the magician, Mage, card number 1 in the tarot. So I already talked a bit about the High Priestess and the Fool, which is like the stage, basically like the cosmos of reality, of emptiness and appearance, or non-existence and existence, infinity and dualism. So those are the numbers 0 and 2. So either the infinite, which is inexpressible and is without appearance or characteristics, emptiness, or subject-object dualism 2. Me and my experience, my awareness, my body, always 1 and 2. So even in eternal experiences are dualistic in nature, always perceiver and perceived. So the binary is 0 and 2. So 1, the mage, it fits in the middle. So who's the mage? The mage is the 1 in 1 and 2, right? It's you, but it's you in your pure state, unacknowledged. So when we get to 21, it's like the complete fruition of the mage. So when we get to 21, that will be the complete fruition of 1. And there's probably a lot of numerology I could get into if I wanted to about the number 21. I don't want to get into that right now. So the dualism in the card is absolutely implicit, and it's the show of faith, right? I am taking what is beyond myself and grounding it into reality. And so there's this automatic relationship between the divine, the transcendent God, wisdom, and the ego, or materialism. And there's this above and below dichotomy that is being expressed. And that's a dichotomy of devotion and transference. So first thing is first, you have to have devotion to something greater than yourself. If you're going to dissolve the very essence of what it is to be a human being, which is the ego, if you're going to face the potential of no longer existing, of ceasing to exist, you have to believe in something greater than yourself. You have to believe that there's something more that you could become than this limited being. If this limited being is all you have, you can't actually begin the path. You have to have something transcendent. So in the beginning, always there's this relationship of me as a limited and seeking the unlimited. And so a lot of people say as above, so below. Yes, that's a witchy thing to say. Yes, that's somewhat implicit in the gesture. Also, look up baby Buddha, or like newborn Shakyamuni, or like born Buddha, and you'll find some pictures. They have, anytime there's a depiction of Buddha when he's first born, he's doing this gesture of as above, so below. He's doing this pointing up and pointing down. The Buddhist tradition, we don't say that. We don't say as above, so below. So that's more of a witchy thing to say. So I actually think the truth, and from my tradition, the truth is much more what I said, that this is somebody who is in the act of devotion to something greater and is trying to bring the light which transcends all things into the material world. He has become a conduit for the love of God, and that is a spiritual life. So the mage is someone who has chosen a spiritual life. Now, another thing is that he is, and this is, as far as I can recollect, the only card which represents the minor arcana, or the cup, pentacle, sword, and rod or staff. And then the fifth element is actually expressed, which we could consider the fifth element like the entirety of the major arcana, which is the wisdom element, but also in the material sense, the fifth element is above his head in the infinity sign, which is space. So earth, fire, water, air, space. You'll see those colors. You see those colors represented in Buddhism. Space as blue, wind as green, earth as yellow, fire as red, and white as water. I believe that's the correspondence. Shame on me for not looking that up. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong. I'm almost positive that's correct. It's been a while. So these are the points in the compass. You have the middle, and then you have east, west, south, north, and this is sort of like a notion of encompassing material reality. So once you have this subject and object of 2, it then further splits into 5. So the 0, the space quality, is considered a 1, and then you have the other 4 natural directions being 5. So the unity of space, the 1, then splits off into 4 separate directions, and you get 5. So in case you're wondering, like, how do we jump from 2 to 5? That's why. That's probably way too esoteric, but it's there, and people often don't notice it, so I thought I'd point it out, because it's fun. So he has faith. He's holding, the rod of, divinity, which is kind of like a yod, or yod. I'm not sure how it's pronounced in Hebrew. By the way, this is all Kabbalic. And Kabbalism is historically Egyptian. And a lot of Jewish people will be angry at me for saying that, but Moses was Egyptian, and his knowledge of God, his knowledge of spiritual technology was Egyptian, and there's a lot of controversial things that I could get into about why that's so, but there are entire books, comparing kind of the match between Judaism and Egyptian belief, including the weighing of one's soul, and the internment in hell, or infinite life with God. Like, that's textbook Egyptian. I'm not sure why I'm expressing that, except to say that, again, this is the Taweret teachings. So these are the teachings of Hathor as the high priestess, which is the river Nile, the water which washes away and renews, which is grief and compassion. To shed tears is to wash away and renew. And she is the high priestess. She is Taweret. I didn't express that before. I will touch on all these things again. If I like, it's by no means is anything I say here like the end of the definition of any one of these cards, whether it's minor arcana or major arcana. These are like infinite wells of knowledge, these little pictures. But anyways, next thing I want to touch on, those elements are not in hand. They are not around, and they are not utilized. They are left on their own. That's actually an expression of meditation. To not meddle with reality, but to settle and leave everything in its place is an expression of meditation. I'll just briefly say that. If you're going to shed your layers of negativity, first things first, you have to build a relationship with your environment. You have to build a relationship with the constituents of your body. So in Buddhism, we have these 5 elements also correlate to the 5 skandhas. And it's actually the most important correlation besides perhaps the 5 negativities. So this number 5 comes up a lot, and it's really important because it has to do with you and your relationship with your experience. So fire, heat, temperature, these are sacred things. And the question being asked in the Mage card is, do you see them as sacred? Do you feel blessing power from them? Have you taken them upon yourself to be an expression of God, to be an expression of the divine, or do you see them as ordinary? And if you see them as ordinary, then the world is cold and dead. And if you see them as divine, if you see water, wind, earth, fire, space as expressions of divine wisdom, then they bless you. They transfer power to you. And you can directly meditate on that. And I'll probably get into that further on. I thought I would get to it now, but honestly, it would take a very long time for me to explain all the ways you can explore that. And for now, these kind of 5 sacreds, it's expressing in this particular major arcana card relationship with these 5 is the transfer, is the implementation. So again, there's a not meddling with them. That's partially a sign of respect. They're not on the ground, they're uplifted on the table. That's a sign of respect. So in Buddhist tradition, we never like put things on the floor that are sacred. We always raise them up, and that's kind of a universal tradition. That's why in the Christian tradition, or in the Hindu tradition as well, a lot of commonalities between religions. Hate to say it, I know we all want to feel special. Sorry. They wash the feet because it's the lowest part of a person. It's the dirtiest part of the person. It's a show of reverence and respect to wash the feet because you are humbling yourself. You're lowering yourself. So these things are not being humbled, they're being exalted. Space or openness, emptiness, being above the crown. When you put something above your head, and you'll see often lamas will put, or monks will put things on their head as a sign of like the greatest reverence, the highest reverence, you know. That's all I'll say about that. But there's a little clue there. Catch it? Space, emptiness being kind of the central point of concentration in the card. Everything else is sort of surrounding the card. So the advice I want to give, and because I just don't want it to be missed, is really build a reverence and understanding of these four: earth, fire, water, air, solidity, temperature, malleability, movement. As aspects of the divine, as aspects of the deity, as aspects of bodhicitta, or the summation of the four immeasurables, the summation of the four Brahma Viharas, or sacred qualities of God. By the way, that's in the original texts. You know, the four Brahma Viharas were taught to Hindus, asking a question of how to reach the state of Brahma, how to reach the God state, or the state of heaven on earth, you might say. He said, practice the four immeasurables. You know, and they're not, in the original text, they're not labeled the four immeasurables. They're labeled like the Brahma Viharas. So directly acknowledging the gods of Hinduism and the method of Hinduism in the Buddhist texts. So that relationship broke up pretty quickly after Shakyamuni died, but you know, it was mended occasionally by yogis. He wears the red and white robes. Red and white robes. White being the masculine element. The pointedness, the concentration, and red, the feminine element, being the relaxedness, the openness, the unfixed nature, potentiality. So you have will and potentiality being masculine and feminine. So there's deeper energetic expressions and very, very sacred, profound practices and ideas connected to the union of masculine and feminine, and I won't touch upon them right here, but they do exist. And often, if you see pictures of Jesus, oftentimes he's wearing red and white, or there'd be a red and white light coming from the heart. If you look at, bishops in the Christian tradition, often they're wearing red and white. Nagbas, like myself, or red and white. There's just a little touch of blue. So these, and by the way, the blue is there. It's right there. Probably would have missed that if I hadn't pointed out. Red, white, and blue. So that's a condensation of the 5 negativities of jealousy, anger, pride. Jealousy, anger, pride. Avarice, ignorance. So we squash those down into 3, which is ignorance, desire, and anger. And we can also say masculine, feminine, union. So, or we could think about it as fire, water, and steam. That's probably a good way of thinking about it. So, that expression, water having this potentiality to boil, fire having this very focused energy that can create this boiling, and then the union of the two allowing for that water to transcend its earthly nature and be sublimated, literally. Sublimation is when a solid becomes a gas in scientific terms, but it has older esoteric meanings as well. To be made sublime. So, the Mage is telling us a lot about the path. And primarily, it's devotion. Devotion being the activity of adoration, of exalting something as being greater than yourself. So when we deeply admire something, when we cherish something, when we wish to be closer to something, it begins to fill our heart. It begins to occupy our mind. And the more that we love, adore, and cherish something, the more that we are enamored with it, the more we geek out on how amazing it is, the more it begins to fill us, the more it occupies our mind, the more we become like that thing. So it's like when you have a friend that you very much admire, and this happens with young people a lot, as you get older, less and less, but it still can happen. You admire someone, or you have a hero that some iconic figure that you adore. You have this need and this drive, and also this resultant thing that happens where you become more like them. So if you have a friend and they have certain jargon or certain ways, subconsciously you find yourself starting to use those phrases, starting to use those mannerisms, starting to become like that person. There are expressions that I use to this day that are other people's, that I loved, that I cared about. And that's what devotion does. Devotion, which is, I always feel is better translated as intense adoration or intense admiration. Admiring love. Devotion makes us engender the qualities to give rise to the qualities, for the seeds or karmic seeds of those qualities which are inherent within us, which are our possibilities within the infinite potentiality that we have when we're born. We could be anything or anything. Those particular seeds begin to ripen, and we start to become like that thing. And that's the name of the game when it comes to transcendence, because you are so messed up initially. Regular human beings are so mucky and just full of all these random causes and conditions, and there's so much chaos that the notion that you by yourself are going to figure yourself out without help is kind of lunacy. But if you have this idol, this thing that you see as being absolutely perfect, you have this image of perfection. Well, if you adore it enough and you're devoted to it enough and you find it just so idyllic, beautiful, wondrous, that you just constantly think to love it and admire it and expound its qualities. If that thing is perfect, you begin to engender the seeds of perfection. And so someone who is very imperfect, if they have extraordinary devotion for someone who is perfect, the path is laid for that person through their love, through their devotion. And that is the signatory, or one aspect of the mage. I think it's the most important aspect of the mage. The mage is somebody who believes in something higher than himself and is going to follow it to its natural conclusion. There's also a notion of this as somebody who has the elements of creation at his fingertips, but he's not using them. So that's oftentimes like a more traditional approach to the mage. Is like, it's like kind of you have these 5 elements and you're going to use them to generate magic. Yeah, that's that's possible. But really, it looks more like he's renounced materiality and the elements of materiality for something higher, in one sense. And then in another sense, it looks like those elements have been put in a place of honor, but they're not being meddled with. And that's really the danger of magic, is that you can meddle with reality to the point where you feel you are above reality. You feel like you are the commander of reality. And perhaps this is an accident. But the yellow color, and it's also in the Fool, and the Fool is very much warning you directly of pride. But that yellow surrounds the mage. One, that's enrichment. It's the color of gold. It's the color of finery. It's the color of purity. But it's also a warning of pride. And so just because you've mastered some element of magic and you can get reality to do what you want it to do, doesn't mean that reality is not going to have its way with you. And if you believe that you're above reality, there's just this really like odd tendency for the universe to punish you and put you in your place when you believe you're above something. So this has happened to me so many times where I've thought, oh, I've finally conquered my anger. And then it's like, oh, just, the bus will be here in 20 minutes. The anger bus is coming, you know. So hubris is like a very reliable trigger for being shown your own follies and faults. And that's why I bring up pride so much, because out of all of the negativities that I found have the potential to punish you, I find pride to be the worst. And they say, even in the Mahayana text, they say for those higher practitioners, those bodhisattvas, the issue always comes down to pride. That's always the thing, kind of the last hurdle, or the thing that hurts them the most. When you begin to have some experience of transcendence, you're human. You can't help but internalize that. And so you kind of have to continuously scrape it away and pull yourself out of that kind of hypnosis of bliss. So I apologize for going off on a bit of a tangent there. Most important thing about the mage is that he is bringing a projection, an image, an idol, ideal of perfection into the material world through the concentration of the mind on something perfect, which is, again, another expression of the infinity sign. Everything all at once. It's sometimes referred to as the Dharma Dhatu, which is another word for Dharmakaya, or an expression of Dharmakaya, or a symbiosis of Dharmakaya, depends on how you look at it, which is enlightened mind. So enlightened mind being the treasury of exalted phenomena, and everything that is divine, excellent, and perfect, and space being the stage, the infinite platform where all creation is expressed. All creation is inherently comes from this stainless space. So all the four material elements come from stainless space. So they're the children of stainless space. So most basics of the mage is it's you getting in touch with the sacredness of externality, of the sacredness of the fives, right? So 5 poisons, 5 skandhas, 5 directions, 5 winds, 5 anything and everything, 5 resplendent qualities, it's an expression of seeing the vehicle of reality as a potential way of extracting wisdom, extracting blessing. So it's saying like these 5 are sacred and they are the divine seeds, and they have a divine quality that can be related to. So these are avenues of devotion as well. So fire, earth, wind, air, space have a wisdom quality that you can find in meditation and relate to and show devotion towards, and thus approach and become and engender those things. And when it comes to the 5 poisons, there, you know, the tantric tradition is about the relinquishment of judgment of the 5 negative aspects, and relinquishing one mind from judgment reveals the 5 exalted aspects. And that's what I'll say about that. That's about as far as I care to tread into dangerous water. But to keep one's mind infinite is to step away from the finite, step away from the relationship of subject and object, which is judgment, which is assessment. This is good, this is bad, I like it, I don't like it, this is perfect and imperfect. And this is actually one of the main key arguments between the Mahayanists and the Vajrayanists, because, and I'll just give one example. Lots of Vajrayana practitioners eat meat, and almost, when I talk to Thai Buddhists and I say, oh yeah, I'm like, I'm really into Buddhism, I'm a Buddhist. And they go, but you're eating meat. And I'm like, yeah, there's types of Buddhism where like eating meat is more common. I was vegetarian for a long time. When I started, I couldn't bear it. I just, I went from being a total carnivore to just not even being able to take it, because I just saw it as murder. And when I met my Genpo, one of the first things he did was sit me down and force me to eat meat. And it was very punishing and very hard, but now I very much appreciate that gesture, because my mind was so intensely cloistered in the judgment of pure and impure. And that in the Christian, in the Judaistic tradition, in the tradition from where the tarot actually comes from, the Kabbalistic tradition, the fall of man is the knowledge of good and evil, which is pure and impure. So when fire and water become indistinguishable, they become steam. When male and female become indistinguishable, they become bliss. When pure and impure become indistinguishable, if one is connected to divinity, wisdom arises. If one is not connected to divinity, and pure and impure become indistinguishable, you give rise to samsara. You're a wandering being who knows not what is to be taken up and what is to be discarded. You're using your mind, your intellect, to choose what you think will benefit you and what will hurt you, and you'll beg, borrow, cheat, and steal to do so, and be just another whirlwind shaking up the world, and not a space of stillness, light, and beneficence. But if you've calmed down because you trust in the sacred, and you have a relationship with the sacred, and you abandon the judgment of pure and impure, this deeper intelligence comes, and it will guide you to what is to be done and not done, and it won't have anything to do with your personality self thinking I like it or I don't like it. It comes from a deeper, more profound place. Dashidele. Feel free to ask me anything else about the Mage. It's really hard to talk about because it's just so wonderful. And I lose myself in it. It's beautiful. You know, it's actually like such a deep reflection of what the Dharma is to me. And, you know, what I would tell Christians what God is to me. And there's so much beauty and so much kindness and so much grace in this world if you know where to look. But it requires that you acknowledge that there is a beneficent presence which is all pervasive, and that you devote yourself to it, that you love it, adore it, you think about it, you ponder it, and you make it the center of your life. And then you're capable of true magic. You're in on the beauty and sacredness of this game we call life, and you're blessed. You're blessed. It's not that suffering is then arrested and you cease to be in pain, or that life doesn't hurt anymore. It's just there's something deep and sacred within the suffering of the world that you have a connection to, and that gives you courage, to face reality. It gives you a strength, and it also gives you a gentleness where others would be too troubled, too frightened, too angry, or too broken to find the will to be kind. You can find the will to be kind even when you're in pain, if you have that connection. And it doesn't mean you'll never blow up and get angry. It doesn't mean that you'll never do anything shameful, but it means that you have a covenant, a sincere aspiration, a sealed contract, that a deep and alluring wish to be closer to this beautiful thing. May you all find it. May we all find it together. Tashi Dele. Sarva Mangalam. I love you very much.